Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the Biomass Magazine podcast series. I'm your host, Anna Simet. On today's episode, we're continuing our International Biomass Conference and Expo panel preview series. And joining us for this edition, we have with us Benjamin Kling with Beta Analytic, where he is a policy research associate. Benjamin, hello. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It's great to have you. So to begin, why don't we start by having you tell us about biogenic testing and what it is that Beta does?
Of course. So biogenic testing is the use of carbon-14 analysis through accelerated mass spectrometry to analyze the renewable portion of materials which are derived wholly or partially from biomass. So that means for any carbon-bearing materials, from bioplastics to biofuels to stackhouse gases, biogenic testing tells you how much of a given sample is derived from biomass as opposed to fossil feedstocks. So Beta is an ISO 17025 accredited commercial laboratory which has been dedicated to carbon-14 expertise for 44 years, traditionally serving archaeology and geoscience industries. In 2004, the USDA approached Beta to develop a scientific standard to measure the bio-based content of products for the Bio-Preferred program. That led to the development of ASTM D6866, which is now the international standard for biogenic and bio-based testing for any of these applications, including the USDA Bio-Preferred program. Beta is also now the largest AMS facility in the world, AMS machines being the most accurate way to conduct C14 testing.
Okay, and Ben, how long have you been with Beta?
Just over a year now.
Okay. So what types of regulations require biogenic testing?
So for biogenic testing, the two main areas which apply are biofuels and then emissions and waste. So for biofuels, the main type of regulations requiring biogenic testing are renewable or low carbon fuel standards. And then for emissions and waste, the main types of regulations are emissions cap, trading, or monitoring programs. So renewable or low carbon fuel standards are programs which are designed to reduce the carbon intensity of a jurisdiction's fuel supply by incentivizing an increasing portion of renewable volumes through annual targets or mandates. So these are programs like the US Renewable Fuel Standard, RFS, the EU Renewable Energy Directive, RED, Canada's Clean Fuel Regulations, CFR, and then state-level low carbon fuel standard, LCFS programs like California's. Emissions cap or monitoring programs are designed to reduce or monitor a jurisdiction's total emissions. So monitoring programs such as the Greenhouse Gas Reporting Programs, GHGRPs, in the US and Canada require any entities emitting over 25,000 megatons CO2 per year equivalent to report their emissions to the countries. Emissions cap programs, commonly called emissions trading systems, ETS, cap and trade or cap and invest programs, issue emissions allowances which must be turned in and retired for every ton of CO2 that's released by regulated entities, with a declining pool of total certificates according to the program's cap. Prominent examples of these programs include the EU ETS and California's cap and trade program.
Okay, so why are biogenic testing requirements so important?
So these testing requirements are critical for these programs in line with their goal of incentivizing the transition away from fossil resources. So testing requirements are a necessary way to make sure that these regulated entities complying with or receiving incentives from these programs can actually verify their claims. The alternative in most cases are calculation-based approaches, like mass balance calculations, which make claims based on material inputs in production. However, it's well known that the input of renewable feedstock is not the same as the output because performance varies and renewable feedstocks don't produce the same quantity of material as their fossil counterparts. Measuring outputs through end product testing is the more fair approach because inputs consistently overestimate the final renewable content. End product testing is especially important if you think of cases like the one in Europe last year, where mass balance was used to verify large amounts of HVO, renewable diesel, but then it was discovered that there was a fraud in the calculations and fossil-derived HVO was being certified as biogenic. As a result of this event, the EU introduced a rule change to the RED's co-processing protocols to require routine direct testing to verify any calculation-based approaches. So that's just one example, but it demonstrates why direct testing is critical to these programs to make sure real decarbonization is achieved, given the potential motivations for actors in the space to greenwash or worse.
Great example. So, what are some existing policies that are likely to adopt biogenic testing requirements in the near future?
So, new testing requirements are likely to be introduced in many of the programs mentioned so far. For fuel standard programs, testing is likely to be introduced for more types of biofuels. RNG and biogas in particular are likely to see more testing requirements as the US RFS just became the first to introduce these in the 2023 set rule. One existing program which could introduce testing for the first time is Washington's LCFS, which started last year and was actually designed to add requirements in line with California and Oregon's programs as it evolves. British Columbia's LCFS also has a proposed rule which would introduce biogenic testing requirements following ASTM D6866 if passed. And the other area of fuel standards likely to see new requirements going forward are sustainable aviation fuels, SAF, as new mandates and incentivization programs are put in place for those. For emissions cap programs, new regulations will be the main area of new requirements, but existing programs which don't currently require testing for both co-firing and municipal solid waste, MSW, are likely to do so going forward.
Okay. So, Benjamin, you're presenting at the upcoming International Biomass Conference and Expo, which we're really looking forward to. What can attendees expect to learn during your presentation?
So I'll talk more about biogenic testing requirements, a lot of these programs that they're involved with, especially some of the newer requirements like that US RFS update that incorporated RNG and biogas, as well as, a wide range of policies that are implementing testing or could implement testing going forward.
hmm Okay, really important stuff. So, I really look forward to seeing you present. Before we wrap things up today, is there anything else that you want to add?
I just mentioned quickly a few policies that aren't out yet, but could come
Sure.
out and could include biogenic testing when they do.
hmm
So on the fuel standard side, the main source of new policies would include new state level LCFS programs. So many states like New Mexico, Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, Vermont, New Jersey, and New York all have active bills proposing to implement LCFS programs. So there could definitely be movement on that front. And then for emissions cap programs, there are many countries and states that are currently looking to introduce new programs over the next several years. And many of these will likely include new biogenic testing requirements. So countries that are currently considering legislation or working to implement ETS programs include Brazil, Argentina, India, Turkey, Indonesia, and many others. The state of New York is currently looking to introduce an economy-wide cap and invest program. Canada recently introduced an emissions cap specific to their oil and gas sector. China is also expected to expand their ETS to integrate sectors that are implicated by the other main type of policy I'll mention, which is EU's CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So CBAM is a carbon border policy which will impose tariffs on goods from countries with lower environmental standards. This has led to legislation calling for similar programs in many countries like the US, the UK, and Australia. So EU CBAM does allow direct testing as a means of demonstrating renewable content, and similar policies elsewhere will likely do the same as they follow.
Thanks for that last ad, Benjamin. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, and we will see you soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conference.
We do too. And to our listeners, learn more about the International Biomass Conference and Expo being held March 4th through the 6th in Richmond, Virginia at biomassconference.com. Producers get in free. Hope to see you there. Thanks for tuning into this podcast. Until next time.